Hey there, my name is Brian Burke, the Executive Director of the Center for Family Business. We are interviewing as many mayoral candidates as we can find, and they are legion these days. One of those, of course, is Barry Vrbanovic, who's been the mayor of the city of Kitchener for the past 8 years or so and joins us this day. Barry, good to have you aboard. Let's go right to something that I think a lot of people talk about, and that is you have been mayor for 8 years. You were on council for 20 years before that, which is a pretty solid record, but there are a lot of people who think that's too long. So why, in your opinion, is that not too long?
Well, Brian. First of all, for having me on and for the great work that the center does supporting family businesses. Obviously, I have been mayor now for 8 years. The last term has certainly been a uniquely challenging one with the pandemic and all of the things that not only we had to deal with as a city, but small business in particular. I mean, we know that all businesses were impacted, but small business in particular was impacted. And as a city, we really worked hard to try to focus on that and mitigate issues and support small business as much as possible. As I look forward, I still have the same love and passion that I've always had for the community. Has some great ideas in terms of how we can continue to build on the successes that we've had. As you know, we during the pandemic just approved a new $110 million economic development strategy, phase 2 of Make It Kitchener 2.0 as we call it. And there's lots of important work to be done on that, looking at how do we continue to grow jobs? How do we continue to see the growth in our innovation sector, particularly in the areas of health innovation and creative industries, which is what we want to focus on as a city, and also looking at how do we support small businesses, particularly those in the sustainability space and social enterprises and businesses that are led by women, by new Canadians, by African, Caribbean, and Black individuals, by Indigenous individuals, and so on.
Uh, Homelessness has always been an issue in the region. I've been around here long enough to know that it has had always a particular connection to Kitchener. And in the last couple of years, what's really changed to me is the visibility of it, which I think is a good thing. I think it's better to be able to see your problems than not be able to see your problems. But with the encampment at Victoria and Weber, and then you have the issues at Victoria Park, it has become much more front and center. It's not easy to ignore anymore. But again, I always hear the same thing. It's a very complex problem, and it is. But what do you, as a mayor, as you look going ahead into these next 4 years, 4 years from now, what do you want to see that's different in terms of homelessness? Because we can't go on this way, right?
No, 100%, Brian. And I mean, I think one of the most concerning things coming out of the pandemic is the growth that we've seen in our homelessness numbers. In 2019, the region, who's responsible in our two-tier system for both affordable housing as the services manager and for as the shelter services manager, did a point-in-time count. And that showed that there was about 300 homeless people throughout Waterloo region. They did another one last year. It was either last fall or this spring, actually, and that count had grown to over 1,000. And I think it speaks to a broader range of issues that we're dealing with, not just in our community, but in fact in urban centers across Ontario, across the country, and beyond that we're going to have to tackle as a society. Well, 4 years from now, what I really hope is that we're in a world where everyone, in fact, is housed in appropriate housing, whether particularly those who are homeless, and we've got appropriate supportive housing in place. Many of those individuals have a range of acuity in different issues that they're dealing with. It's not just the homelessness factor, but often there's complexities around mental health, addictions, and other issues. And so when we look at things like the new House of Friendship residence that's being renovated right now in Waterloo on Weber Street is going to be an important part of that solution, because they call it shelter care, and it's a wraparound approach that not only looks at ensuring people have a roof over their head, but they have the other supports necessary so that they can transition out from supportive housing into the housing continuum.
Is there any hope, Barry? Because you've been involved in this and you've been at the table, and I wonder, as I look at the Victoria and Weber encampment, and I wonder winter's coming. Is this something, are there steps that can be taken to, I guess the word is empty, that encampment prior to the arrival of winter, or is just this something we're going to have to deal with on a day-to-day basis?
No, listen, I can tell you that certainly for me, and I know for many others, this is a very significant priority. The renovations at the House of Friendship building on Weber Street continue full speed ahead. And I know they're looking to have it ready so that people can move in during the upcoming cold weather. It's taken a little longer than I think everyone hoped, but that continues to progress. But more importantly, the motion that I had put on the table in June calling for an urgent plan in order to deal with this is being acted on. And so you saw that the region moved folks from the Edith McIntosh facility, which was only temporary, into Schwaben, the former Schwaben Club on King Street, where they have a 2-year lease. They've renewed an arrangement with a new provider in the space that they used last winter at the YW. And I know that very shortly, staff will be bringing a report back to the region dealing with a managed encampment, kind of like a Better Tent City 2.0, as a way of making sure that all of these folks that are sleeping in the rough right now have the opportunity to avail themselves of one of these opportunities.
When we talk about housing these days, we talk about affordable housing, and we hear about zoning, which is always the most fascinating part of any city council discussion, is zoning. But I wonder, we have commodified the housing market. It is, for as many people as are upset about the high cost of houses, there's some people who own houses who are really happy about it. So, how do we work with developers and a capitalistic system to build housing that is affordable?
So, that certainly has been a big issue in question over the last little while. And while we've seen some adjustments in the price of housing, the fact that interest rates have gone up has kind of balanced that out, so that really they're for the person who's looking at purchasing potentially, it has not really adjusted the overall cost to them in terms of their income. And the challenge for those who are renting is that rental prices have gone up quite substantively as well. Now, we do know that for existing tenants, increases are limited. But as soon as a unit becomes available, a landlord can increase the price to current market rates, and that's creating some pressures. So it's really going to take not only an all of government approach, but in fact an all of community approach to tackle this. And as you say, work with the development industry and so on. As a city, we've done a number of things as part of that economic development strategy. And in fact, we've recognized that affordable housing is a big part of economic development. And so we've set aside $15 million in either cash or land value to support affordable housing programs. And in fact, our first investment of around $2.5 million went to the YWCA on a property that we owned in front of St. Mary's High School in the Country Hills Library. And that is now home to 41 units of supportive housing for women run by the YWKW. And also 7 units of affordable housing for single mothers with children, and that's deeply affordable. We've also removed development charges for new not-for-profit housing projects. Again, looking at ways to support those who are building these kinds of projects to make it more affordable so that we can get them built quicker and get people into them. As different points along that housing continuum open up, it creates spots in other areas of the continuum. And so what we want to do is continue to do that, as well as make sure there's a variety of choices for those who want to buy. So as you know, in Kitchener, we have as of right duplexing that's permitted. We've allowed tiny homes and coach houses, secondary suites. That is something that is certainly gaining some traction. And we recently approved the regional official plan and looking at, how do we continue to support the growth in this community with necessary land supply, while also protecting our countryside line and seeing, a lot more of our growth happen either through the missing middle or going up, as opposed to going out into farmland.
Last thing here, because we are running out of time, regional council looking at a tax increase projected, proposed, whatever word you want to use, of close to 11%. You're a regional councillor. I know from a little bit of experience, no one wants to pass a tax increase of 11%, but you've got police, you've got homelessness, you've got opioids, you've got all these issues that are on the table. Where are you on 11% tax increase?
Yeah, Brian, I was quite surprised to see that report come forward. It's certainly not something, and I was very clear at council that day. Assuming that I'm fortunate enough to continue serving our community, I've been very clear that there is not a place where I could ever support a tax increase of that amount. The reality is that nobody in our community is seeing those kinds of wage increases. And so while it will certainly be very difficult, I think part of what we need to do is focus on the things that really are important right now, the human-focused programs that we need to deliver, particularly around places like housing and so on, because they have so many other impacts on people and on our community. So we need to focus on those, and maybe, just slow down a few of the other things while we do that, in order to get that tax increase, in certainly much lower than what's being proposed right now. I know inflation is high, but this is even significantly more than inflation, and so there's I can't see a world where regional council would support that, and there's a lot of work that will need to be done, both by the new council and staff, to get it into a place that is reasonably affordable for people.
Barry, thanks for your time. And for everybody else, remember, voting day is October the 24th.